A very good morning to you and welcome to K24 this morning. My name is Mungalambuvi, sitting in for Jeff Mote on this particular situation where we're talking about a lot of things rather that are happening in the country. And here are our headlines as far as the newspapers are concerned, starting with the People Daily. DCI probes how Sonko killed himself to escape jail. Our story is on page 2. Now, in case this news hasn't reached you yet, a couple of months ago, a lot of people were saying that Sonko did spend some time at the Shimola Tewa prison in Mombasa and somehow managed to escape by faking his death at one point when he had gone to visit the hospital for treatment. And that story now has emerged after he was impeached as governor of Nairobi last year. But, of course, we shall be taking a look at those stories and much more as far as that is concerned. Another story, though, showdown looms as MPs reconvene. We're looking at Raila Odinga and William Ruto, of course, being the agenda for that particular conversation. You can find it on page 4. And this is what it says, that with an impeachment motion against the deputy president, BBI proposals and a fractious house, the sessions in parliament are expected to be heated from Tuesday. Get that story on page 4 of the People Daily. And as you move down there, you can see that Mashemeji shares spoils after sides fail to score in Derby. That story is on page 2. And on page 4, which county will follow Siaya in passing the BBI? Well, let's see how that unfolds. And of course, on page 17, 16-year-old Kenyan stowaway in police custody as well. That conversation, of course, on page 17 of your People Daily. Moving on to the next newspaper, which is the Standard newspaper. Impeachment. Once again, Jubilee has no plans to remove the DP. A day after it was revealed that the renewed attempt to remove Ruto from office was in top gear, the ruling party's Secretary General dismisses the claim as mere speculation. Of course, Raphael Tuju coming out to speak on behalf of the Jubilee Party. That story is on page 8. And as you go down, is it time to end curfew? That's a very good question. Business owners, and especially those who operate at night, have been asking whether it is time already to lift the curfew and just allow people to conduct their business without a lot of pressure. We are talking about the bar owners, restaurants as well, and of course, a voice that is sometimes ignored. Twilight Girls also saying that they need their time back. A conversation, of course, to have as well. Lost jobs, lost livelihoods during the day. Very little will tell you we are living in odd times, and a lot of the strict COVID-19 measures have disappeared with time. And super spreader political rallies are back, but the nights are eerily different. The 10 p.m. to 4 a.m. curfew stands. Now business owners are asking questions. Story is on page 4 and 5 of the Standard newspaper. And of course, week of reckoning as MCAs troop back to the assemblies. The clock is ticking, but experts warn that the bill must be subjected to public participation or it risks legal challenges. Well, again, still on the BBI as far as that conversation is concerned. And when the treatment feels worse than the disease, that is on your health pullout of the Standard newspaper. And of course, 317, the number of days Kenya has been under night curfew, just little under an entire year. All right, let's move on to the Daily Nation. Moi stalwart was steeped in debt. Hosea Kiplagat played cat and mouse games with auctioneers. As so is on page 10. You can catch the full information there. Indiscipline shock as hefty penalties. Parents to pay millions for distraction. That story is on page 8 as students all over the country are going on a rampage. Well, what is going to be done? Yes or no? Big fight over BBI questions after choosing not to lead the campaign against the Building Bridges initiative. The Deputy President William Ruto's allies are demanding a multiple question referendum, an option ODM leader Raila Odinga sees as a cowardly way out. We have been talking about this one for months, and the conversation seems not to be going away anytime soon. Well, you can get that story on page 4. And also teachers promotion, about 33,000 shortlisted for interviews. That is definitely a conversation teachers are looking forward to have. For a very long time, they have been asking the government for promotions in various sectors. And finally, the conversation seems to be starting. And then, of course, Coast Unity governors meet to chart region's destiny. Joho, Kingi, Twaha, and Godoa to convene at Samboja's home on Wednesday, but Mvurya is yet to confirm. That story is on page 6 of your Daily Nation. Moving on to the Star newspaper. Uhuru Ruto showdown as Parliament resumes. Again, these MPs fighting on behalf of their leaders that is the president, the deputy, and of course Raila Odinga. And police seize weapons as an MCA flees in Marsabit. This one happened yesterday, and police are in hot pursuit because it's alleged that he's been arming the residents against each other. And panic as anti-terror police arrest Mike Sonko aides and search his houses. Raila hosts about 1,000 delegates in Kisumu to unify political base. You can get that story on page 6. And of course, ready to engage. Nurses promise smooth ride for new Council of Governor chair if he resolves strike. Well, it looks like that one is going to be literally a hot seat. And then lastly, Business Daily. The Attorney General seeks wider watch over tender billions. You can get that story on your People Daily. Some state firms dodge the procurement law by splitting tenders to escape scrutiny. MPs to prioritize KQ bill as House resumes sitting. And of course, about 597 billion. That is the value of the SACCO sector's assets in their third quarter of 2020. You can get that on page 16. And surging climate lawsuits put oil farms on the edge as well. And a bigger story there, value of card payments down 6.4 billion. Every time you use your Visa or MasterCard or any other card, well, that means that a lot of money is passing through the banks and into the hands of business people. And then last but not least, looking at page 4, it's all about Medicare. Treasury is developing a post-retirement health cover for 663,000 government workers. Get your copy of the Business Daily for that and more. But on to another story. Persons living with disabilities are now calling on the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions and the relevant security authorities to look into the remarks made by Suna East Member of Parliament Junet Mohammed on nominated Senator Isaac Mwaura that they say borders on hate speech. NCIC says it is now looking at taking action against the legislator as they believe the remarks are likely to breed hatred.
Katiba ibadilishwe, wazungu yote wakuwe kama walemavu. Huyu mtu anaitwa Isaac Mwaura. Mimi nilikuwa nafikiri yeye ni mlemavu ambaye inafaa saidiwe. Kumbe yeye ni mtu ambaye ni mzungu ambaye ni nyeupe tu.
Those were the remarks by Suna East Member of Parliament Junet Mohammed during a Building Bridges Initiative popularization bid in Turkana County on Saturday that have since elicited mixed reactions, with Junet now forced to apologize over the same. People living with disabilities in Kenya were the first to voice their concerns early Sunday morning, hitting on Junet over the remarks.
We wish to condemn in the strongest of terms possible remarks by Junet Mohammed that Senator Isaac Mwaura breached his skin in order to be nominated to Parliament. This is not only an affront to the person and character of the distinguished senator as our representative, but it is also an abuse of the dignity of all of us collectively.
That Junet Mohammed should immediately withdraw and apologize for his rather unfortunate, demeaning and dilatory remarks towards our leader, Honorable Senator Isaac Mwaura, if at all he deserved the literal and honorable member of Parliament.
The recent remarks by ODM legislator comes days after the National Cohesion and Integration Commission, a body charged with taming such vices, released a list of shame containing the names of political leaders linked to public incitement.
Action should be taken.
Speaking today, representatives of people living with disabilities are now calling for an official apology from the ODM legislator, failure to which they shall issue an official complaint.
Action should be taken by the National Cohesion and Integration Commission. We'll give all those instruments and arms of government 14 days to take action, including DCI. Failure to which then will be left with no option but to take action as persons with disabilities.
Junet Mohammed, through his Twitter account, has however since issued an apology to people born with albinism amid his criticism of his perceived offensive remarks. The apology read, and I quote, "I want to apologize to people born with albinism. My comments in no way reflects my opinions of them as upstanding citizens of our county. My comments were directed at the rotten character of Isaac Mwaura, who exploits his disability for personal gain and incitement of violence." End quote. The sentiments made by Jeanette were heavily criticized, with Kenyans among them being Makueni Governor Kivuthe Kibwana, who in a tweet said, I quote, Baba has consistently supported persons with disability. He was very vocal on this in the 90s at Bomas. This I must say of him. Therefore, his supporters must be extremely careful about what they say about PWDs. End quote. The NCIC has said that it is now considering taking action against Suna East Member of Parliament Mohammed, stating that his claims were likely to breed hatred between people of different skin color if left unattended to.
Quite unfortunate, Dave, you asked me as far as those remarks are concerned. But he went on to apologize. With me to have this conversation, of course, to make sure that we look at it from different perspectives and different vantage points. I do have Lydia Mathia, the policy analyst, founder, Daughters of the Mountain. Welcome to the show, madam.
Thank you, thank you.
All right. And we also have the Secretary General of Third Way Alliance, Mr. Fred Okango. Mr. Fred, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Always a pleasure. And of course, last but not least, we have Gloria Oroba, youth policy analyst with us. Gloria, habari asubuhi.
Good morning.
Okay, let me start off with you, Gloria, as far as those remarks are concerned. What was your first feeling when Jeanette said those words, even before he went on to apologize hours later?
I think a lot of these elected leaders have sort of just lost their minds. And one of the things that it was clear, he probably didn't think that it would be taken that seriously. And, you know, it's unfortunate because that also shows a lot about his character. It means that he's not really aware. He's not, he doesn't have the empathy. He's not aware of what it means to be a person with disability. It also means he's not socialized around those kind of around the people with disability, and it's unfortunate because you see, at the end of the day, that Jeanette was actually elected. People went and voted for him to represent them. So and then when I saw his apology, I thought, okay. He's not really apologizing. What he's saying is, I meant what I meant, and I said what I said. Because at the end of the day, he's still saying that, you know, my target really was to this particular person, and regardless of whether he is a person with disability or otherwise, you know, he's not really aware. The sensitivity towards the issue of people with disability it does not come out to him as an issue of discussion. Right. And unfortunately, Jeanette is one of the people who are who are marketing the Building Bridges initiative. And remember, the constituency of people of the people with disability have been against the Building Bridges initiative because they felt that their issues, that their matters are not being looked upon. So when I heard Jeanette speak the way he spoke, definitely you can see that the people with disability are not really represented well within that task force and the drivers of the initiative of Building Bridges initiative. Right,
and Lydia, I'll come to you as well. You know, it is one thing when someone says things out of the blue, and one thing, because we all make mistakes. I mean, we all say things that we don't like, whether we are sober, whether we are not, but this is a leader. Everything that he says is literally on a microscope. Everything he says is on a microphone. What would you say about his character?
I think this is what I'd say. First of all, any negative sentiment you can possibly have about persons with disability, you have to just put it aside because I think they go through enough. They don't need any person speaking negatively about them anywhere. That said, I think it calls on us to reflect because Isaac Mwaura himself has been in a lot of trouble in the last month or so because of his own utterances. And I think also then the community of people with disability also need to tell us whether when he speaks the way he speaks, when he insults the president's family, is he also usually speaking on their behalf? When he goes to Roiro and he says, Leo, baba kikuja hapa, watu hapa watamwambia hapa kuna wenyewe. Is he also usually speaking on their behalf? I think that's also something we need to have clarity, even as we, you know, castigate Jeanette and all that. I think also Isaac needs to be held to a higher standard because he has been running roughshod, saying everything he wants to say. And now when, you know, the political heat comes back at him, he goes and hides behind the person with disability. Is he always speaking for them? I think that's also something they need to tell us.
Fred, do you think that this is a situation whereby the kettle is calling the pot black?
Definitely. But before even we go there, I think it is important to understand what is hate speech.
Okay.
Remember, the provisions of National Integration Cohesion Act criminalizes hate speech. And it defines hate speech as a speech or written communication that is designed to prejudice a certain group of people, religion, sex, or whatever, you know. And to that extent, hate speech is criminal.
Okay.
And also it goes ahead to give a fine. If you are charged with it, you can be jailed, you know. You are liable to a fine of 1 million or a jail time of 3 years or both. However, people who are shamelessly propagating hate speech are very shameless. Some of those politicians have consistently done that in a fashionable manner to attract voters. But they also argue that, you know, there is freedom of expression in the Constitution as provided for in Article 33. But they forget, and because you mentioned the character, you ask what is the character of this guy.
Right.
They forget that there is a limitation to that freedom of expression. And it says that that expression or right to that expression shall not extend to war for propaganda, hate speech, or advocacy for hatred.
Yeah.
In my view, if I look and listen to some of, it's not only Mwaura.
Yes.
There have been so many. Some of them, the CIC, the National Cohesion Integration Commission, listed in the list of shame. That is not enough. Now, this issue of hate speech, it is very dangerous. And it is dangerous because it comes from people who are elected. And these are state officers. What does the law say about the conduct of state officers? Whether in public or in private or in association with others, like in a rally. You must conduct yourself in a manner that do not demean the office that you hold. What does it say about the responsibility of leadership? You as a leader. That authority that is assigned to you as a leader is a public trust. And you must exercise it in a manner that, first of all, respect the people that you lead. Then, in a manner also that brings honor and integrity to the nation and the office that you hold. That's correct. And you look at these issues and realize we have forgotten about the provisions of Chapter 6 that provides for integrity and leadership, and we have taken it head-on as a political fashion of, you know, beating our competitors on the political podium. It is wrong. Remember, there is a judgment by Mumbi Ngugi in 2019, a petition, one Ferdinand Waititu. When he was appointed, I think, one of the heads of a water body. And that judgment found that the person who was appointed was not fit to hold that office because of incitement that happened before. And therefore, I aver that any officer, whether public or private, any issue that relates on the hate speech or borders on division is a no. And we must criminalize it. We must call it what it is.
Gloria, it looks like our leaders are used to making these kinds of remarks, because if I remember well, there is a time when President Kibaki was making a public speech. He called, I think, his driver, Mavi Akuku. You know, we've had situations whereby, a Gatondo member of parliament, Mr. Moses Kuria, he has gone on to say a couple of very demeaning things, some that cannot even be said on air, cannot be repeated on air. We have Babu Owino as well, just a couple of days ago also, was caught in a similar situation. Do you feel like this is just a trend by our leaders to just generally speak rubbish, for lack of a better word?
I think it's a culture, and I think it's a culture that we have bred. But then when I also look at the elected leaders that we've had, at least the last term, we are talking about over 30 MPs who are under the age of 35 years. So while I'd like to think of it as a sort of culture that we are breeding, I also understand that, you know, most of these elected leaders have not really had any kind of mentorship or you know, what you would call experience within the political arena. So like you mentioned, certain few, and it's not only in the issues of being abusive or that kind of public utterances that are not necessarily respectful, but it's also in the activities that they choose to engage themselves. You have mentioned Babu Owino. We don't want to talk about that, but you know the whole the surrounding of the activities that he chooses to engage himself.
Yes.
There are so many others who, when you look at and you think, okay, we elected this leader, but you can see that they need some sort of guidance or mentorship from probably the veteran politicians. But you know, what's really important to note is when you look at 2007, 2008 election violence that we had, both pre-election violence and post-election violence, you will note that we are actually walking the same path, because it wasn't really just about the leaflets that were distributed or the SMSs. It was also about the utterances that were being displayed by those elected leaders. And you look at the number of deaths that we had in 2007, 2008 pre-election violence. We had 41 people dying in rallies. 25 of those 41 people who died in rallies because of that kind of push and pull. So when I look at the things that have been happening, let's say in the last 2 or 3 weeks, I want to think that we need to think about this seriously. We need to engage the agencies that have the responsibility to sort of bring down the political temperatures, to hold people accountable. We've seen elected leaders going out and fighting, you know, in events, rallies or otherwise. We want to see people being held accountable so that at the end of the day, if I'm an elected leader and I feel like maybe I cannot control myself and contain myself, I will remember that when Junet Mohammed went out and actually, you know, spoke the things that he spoke, he was held accountable. He was actually punished. He had to go and, you know, write statements or whatever, but we don't see that. So at the end of the day, what really we are doing is we are breeding a culture at which point we won't just be talking about utterances, but it's really divisive politics, which I would like to think the Building Bridges initiative is saying they are trying to address. So maybe this is the point where hopefully a lot of other leaders will come out and do something.
Lydia, there's a time, I think, someone was called Madimoni. There's also a time when I think a presidential candidate was called Mugoroki. If we are getting to that point whereby we are insulting each other like that on that particular level, is it time that maybe all our elected leaders, once you're elected into office, you should take a certain class? Just like before you go to the States, you have to go through SATs and, you know, test of English as a foreign language. Or if you're going to study in Russia, you have to be taught Russian. Or China, you have to learn Mandarin. Do you feel like maybe when we elect a leader, an MP, an MCA, or even a president, probably that person should be taken to a certain class that takes a certain period of time on etiquette and probably even just public trust?
I think this culture that Gloria is talking about is something that sort of reflects our collective failure as society, because even as we look to our leaders and how they are talking, let's also see how do we talk amongst ourselves as well. How do we speak when we're in those clubs and in those kibandas and in the market? How do we talk to each other? How does a Makanga talk to you when he's cutting you off, or when he's in a rush? There's a way we talk to each other that is just devoid of respect. So I think even as we look to the leaders, we have to reflect also on ourselves and say, we really need to hold ourselves to a higher standard. Of course, for the leaders, they have to be a little bit keener. You have to elevate your rhetoric, you know, when you're a leader. You've been elected by people. You cannot just carry yourself like the Makanga or, you know, the ordinary person on the streets, because your words have impact. You've seen when people make certain comments, they instigate violence. They can instigate certain, you know, actually incidences to happen on the ground. And I think all our leaders, all of them, must elevate their rhetoric. We must be able to have arguments and disagreements on policy and suggestions and ideas without necessarily it becoming an insults match between parties. And I think that's what all of us should aspire to. But ultimately, I think what is enabling this culture to perpetuate itself and to continue to survive and thrive is the lack of accountability. When people do something and they're not sanctioned for it, they're likely to repeat the same behavior pattern. So we need NCIC to step up. What is criminal needs to be treated as criminal. Let us not call it, tensions, political tensions. Let us actually act on these things so that once we sanction, and there are a few examples of people who paid the price, then we'll probably moderate, conduct going forward.
Okay. We'll take a short break right now, but when you return, of course, we'd like to read from you at home or at work. What do you feel? What do you think about our leaders and the kind of things that they say to each other or even to the nation as far as this hate speech is concerned? What do you think also the NCIC needs to do? And also, like we've asked, should we have a special class for all these people who get elected into all these positions? We'll be right back, of course, with the conversation going on right here on K24 TV.